Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 11, The Loss. Brooke was struggling in the fight with the black-armored enemy. This other warrior looked very similar to the one-star rapier-wielding enemy that Faye killed. They both used the same fighting technique and weapon. The rapier was very fast when compared with Brooke's double-handed sword. I will finish him, you go ahead and direct the soldiers to wipe out the remaining enemies on the defense wall. Faye yelled at Brooke. Faye stuck his axe in between the two, twisted his wrist and the axe collided with the tip of the rapier accurately. The intervention from Faye forced the enemy to back off a bit and reevaluate his situation. Be careful, warrior, this bastard is tricky to handle. As the second commander of the king's guards, Brooke was one of the top few people that had authority and influence at Chambord Castle. But because of the heroic actions of this Iron Man, who had his face covered up by a helmet completely, he didn't hesitate to listen to his orders. That's weird, I swear that I saw this armor somewhere before, Brooke thought. However, there wasn't any time to waste, so Brooke turned away and started commanding the Chamordian soldiers. Faye on the other hand was ready to battle this enemy. You're the one who killed 20. This enemy looked very solemn. He was concentrating and the energy in his body was circulating faster and faster. He was ready to unleash it at will. He was nervous after previously seeing Faye's single strike that took out 20 as he was not any stronger than his comrade. He had to give it all he got to gain a slight chance of surviving under Faye's axe. I can't fight him with pure strength. This enemy came up with a plan in his mind. His rapier suddenly shot out. The attacks were more aggressive and faster than when he was fighting Brooke. Because he was thinner and smaller than Faye, as well as his weapon being lighter and sneakier, he was planning on using his faster movement and attack speed to tire Faye out and use a deadly strike when Faye shows a flaw in his defense. Faye had soon found out this enemy's strategy. His laughter was full of pity. This enemy was like a fallen shaman in the Diablo world. It was a human-like monster that held a blade in one hand and a torch in another. The fallen shaman was sly and cruel, both moving and attacking fast. When it was at a disadvantage, it would try everything to run from the fight. After Faye leveled up to level 5, his solution for monsters like these was simple, one strike and done. This strategy was no use against Faye. Any tricks and strategies were like potato chips in front of absolute power, they would be crushed easily. What was a barbarian? The god of close-range combat. Doesn't matter if it was strength or skill level on various weapons, barbarians will always be ranked number 1 in the Diablo world. If a barbarian would be defeated so easily by such a strategy, Faye would have died in the Diablo world thousands of times already. Again, only one strike from Faye had damaged the internal organs of this enemy, and he had to back off while puking blood. His rapier was shattered into pieces. Some pieces even plunged back into his body because of the power of the collision. Back. This enemy was terrified. He wasn't even close to defeating Faye. After that first contact, he knew right away that this man's axe techniques were even scarier than his strength. He had no chance in winning this fight. This enemy threw out a weird-looking hook. A string was attached to it so it could be used as a swing. After it landed on and was secured onto one of the battlements, he jumped down the defensive wall and tried to swing away from the battle and from Faye. Almost like a Spider-Man. However, if you already came, then stay. Faye was not going to give this enemy the chance to escape, he said as he kicked a double-handed sword on the ground. The sword traced the path of the enemy, fast as lightning. It pierced the enemy in the back mid-air and killed him instantly. The sword nailed his dead body to the ground under the defense wall. You're welcome, Faye said to the dead body savagely, as he was about to return to smashing all the remaining enemies. A few strange-sounding horns came from the enemy's base far away and soon spread around the battlefield. Enemies receded from the defensive wall around Chambord and returned to their base quickly, like a tide on the beach. The enemies retreated. The defenders of Chambord cheered in surprise as they saw what had happened. In comparison to the defenders, after seeing the retreat of their own soldiers, the remaining enemies knew that the commander had given up on them already and their morale sunk. After defending for a short while, they all threw down their weapons and went on their knees and surrendered. The soldiers of Chambord had quickly taken back control of the defense wall. But 200 yards away from the middle of the defense wall, the battle wasn't over. The first commander of the king's guards, a 3-star warrior Frank Lampard, was fighting to the death with an enemy swordsman named Landis. Both of their energies were clashing with each other. One red and one blue, the energies that leaked out of their battle had destroyed everything around them, including both the defenders and the attackers of Chambord, as well as the defense walls around them. No one could even come closer than within 10 yards of them. Fei had smashed a couple more enemies who were still resisting on the way to the battle. He squinted at Landis as he was calculating how he could help Lampard in this fight. The battles Fei engaged in had built his confidence. He was feeling invincible. However, Fei soon found out that this battle was way out of his expectation. After he got closer to this fight, he felt a huge pressure. The red and blue energies that were leaking out of the battle had left many shocking marks on the defense wall. Fei's instinct told him that he was in an extremely dangerous place. The experience from the numerous battles with the monsters in the Diablo world had trained Fei's brain. He immediately knew that he was no match to either Lampard or the enemy swordsman. They both were at least twice as strong as him. When Fei was thinking, someone in the battle had yelled. Master had commanded the retreat. I will let you guys live for one more night. After we conquer your castle, not a single one of you will survive. The Landis's energy started covering his body. It looked like he was covered in a huge burning flame. He forced away Lampard with a powerful strike and turned around, and chopped a few of the closest Chambord soldiers in half. Then he jumped off of the defense wall laughing out loud while the soldiers cried in pain. Fei couldn't take it anymore. Bastard! How dare you kill my soldiers to show off? He used the same tactics and kicked out a weapon on the ground. An iron spear flew towards Landis at a high speed, as if it was a huge arrow shot from a military crossbow. I will grant your wish. Swordsman Landis found out angrily that, other than the 3-star warrior Lampard, an ant like trash had dared to attack him. He roared with his body spinning in midair and stepped onto the shooting iron spear. He jumped back towards the defense wall using the momentum from the spear, like a fluttering eagle. Die. Exploding sunstrike. A stream of red energy, appearing as intense as erupting lava radiating deadly heat, was shot towards Fei. Be careful. Lampard warned Fei. He was planning to save this Iron Man, but the excessive fighting had triggered the indiscernible internal injury he had from 10 years ago and caused him to puke a ton of blood and immobilized him. Lampard was surprised by his condition, but there was nothing that he could do. Let's see how strong you really are. Although the enemy was twice as strong as Fei, but it had ignited his fighting spirit even more. The pride of a barbarian had affected Fei's personality subconsciously, and he wasn't going to back off. His huge double-handed axe turned into a cloud of black shadow in his hand, and smashed into the exploding sunstrike with a massive amount of force. The collision spilled red energy all around and damaged the defensive wall even more. Fei was forced back 30-40 steps by the energy until he had finally got a hold of himself. Blood had rushed out of his mouth and dyed the heavy armor to the color of the blood. Fei felt dizzy and his body started wobbling. The soldiers and defenders were shocked. This collision of power had determined who was the stronger one. The invincible metal warrior of Chambord had lost. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 12, It's Him. Although no one knew what kind of a face was under that helmet, this man definitely gained the trust and respect from the soldiers. After seeing Fei lost the fight, Brooke and a few other brave soldiers sprinted towards Fei, ready to sacrifice their own lives to protect this man, who single-handedly saved Chambord Castle from the enemy siege today. Swordsman Landis was a 3-star warrior as well, but he knew that he had an advantage. The opponent's terrifying dragon-like strength struck him during the collision. His right arm that held his sword felt numb, and he had a hard time breathing. Worst of all, the collision had sent him midair southwest. He had no place to step on to regain his momentum. But Landis didn't stop there. He flung his left wrist and a hook flew out. It was a similar hook that the previous enemy used. After it locked onto the battlement, he forcefully pulled the string and the momentum sent him back onto the defensive wall. Brooke and the other soldier who were trying to help couldn't move an inch closer towards the explosive energy and pressure. Landis' energy empowered his weapon again. With red flames on the sword, he pierced towards Fei. He decided to teach this trash a deadly lesson that he shouldn't mess with a 3-star warrior. The soldiers and defenders were terrified. Everyone thought that Fei was going to die for sure. However, Bastard, that's all you got. Fei slightly tilted his body, not trying to dodge at all. As if he was so scared that he forgot to move, the sword went through his shoulder easily. However, Fei immediately roared like a wounded lion. Barbarian's war cry. The mysterious power appeared again right after the roar. Landis was stunned. He felt really scared. He never felt this way before. It caused the energy in his body to freeze for a second. Behind the opponent's helmet, Landis saw eyes filled with craziness. These eyes represented death. Die. Dumbass. Fei concentrated his strength into this one punch and aimed at Landis' chest. Landis' mind wasn't clear because he was affected by Howl. Although he felt danger, he wasn't able to dodge this punch. The enormous force didn't give him any chance. He was punched back instantly and blood spurted out of his mouth. His body smashed onto the battlement and broke it. Both of them fell off of the defense wall. His sword was still stuck on Fei's shoulder. Although Landis had the energy of a 3-star warrior, after getting hit by this power punch, the damage to his body was enormous. His was filled with shock and disbelief as he was falling down. He struggled to fling out his hook, eventually being secured onto the defense wall. He pulled on it, canceling out the acceleration he was experiencing from falling down, and landed safely. Although he was injured, falling through the defense wall wasn't enough to kill him. He looked to the top of the defense wall, hesitated for a bit, then decided to temporarily retreat. He felt a call from the Grim Reaper when he was punched. Although that man's power was far lower than his, the craziness and the will for battle made him lose the courage to fight that man again. On the defense wall, the way that the soldiers looked at Fei, who still had the sword stuck on his shoulder, completely changed. Respect, unimaginable madness, worship. They looked at him as if he was a god of war. Even the 3-star warrior Lampard, who had finally recovered a little bit from the indiscernible injury, stared at Fei with respect and seriousness. After the series of attacks between Fei and Landis, only Lampard could clearly see what kind of a warrior this Iron Man was. At this point, the question on everyone's mind was, who is he? Who could he be? Everybody asked themselves, under the helmet dyed with the blood of the enemy, what kind of a face does he have? Fei raised his arm. Every tiny action of Fei was observed to the absolute smallest detail by the people of Chambord. He placed his left hand on the handle of Landis' sword, that was still stuck on his right shoulder. He bit his teeth and pulled it out. An arrow of blood shot out the metal armor. Some people couldn't resist and yelled as if they were the one who was pierced. Fei didn't shake or make any noise. He made it look painless and simple, which yet again stunned the numerous observers. Fei took a long breath after he pulled the sword out. The immediate pain made him dizzy for a while, but he held himself together really well, so no one could see it. After the pain and dizziness passed, he took off his helmet slowly. This scene was even slower in the eyes of the soldiers and defenders. It was like a slow-motion action film for them. It only took a second, but it seemed like a decade in the observers' eyes. Finally, the mystery was unveiled. They saw the face under that helmet. His black hair was dripping wet and was stuck onto his forehead, and his thick eyebrows and his shining smile had made his face even more handsome. He is. The soldiers on the defense wall had forgotten how to breathe and speak, as if they had just stared at Medusa. 3-star warrior Lampard was a very serious person, but now his mouth was wide open, not knowing what to say. The second commander of the King's Guards, Brooke, and the other few directors kept wiping their eyes. They couldn't believe that they saw. They all thought they were too tired and were seeing thing. It was King Alexander. Impossible. To tell the truth, before Fei took off his helmet, everyone was guessing who this warrior might be. But after considering everyone, even including the homeless and the beggars at Chambord, no one would expect to see the face of their king. The famous retard King Alexander. This was the man who was the absolute shame to Chambord for the past 3 years. It's him. But how could it be? It was deathly silent on the defense wall. The shock that Fei gave to the defenders from taking off his helmet was 10 times stronger than the shock he gave them when he destroyed the 2 1-star warriors and injured the 3-star warrior Landis. After 3-4 minutes of silence, someone finally accepted reality and yelled, "It's King Alex. Alexander. It's King Alexander." This yell had woken everyone up. Everyone finally believed what they had seen, and they were all red-faced and yelled in excitement. God. It really is King Alexander. It really is King Alexander. King Alexander saved us. Hail King Alexander. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 13, The Peace After the Storm. The soldiers went crazy. It was way too surprising. Just like pouring a cup of water into a pot of boiling oil, heat exploded everywhere. Every defender felt a burning sensation inside of them, like a fire wanting to burst open. All the excitement and glory of fighting beside the king came together and formed into one shout. Hail King Alexander. The sounds of the shout traveled far away, and even got the attention of the enemies in their base, located on the other side of the Zuli moat. Fei was shouting along with the soldiers. He was sure that he had impressed all of them. To make his return more epic, he waved his hand to quiet down the crowd. The soldiers quickly shut their mouths. They followed Fei's orders as if Fei was a god. Fei walked towards the center of the defensive wall. Staring at all the soldiers, he raised his trophy, the 3-star warrior Landis sword, and cheered, "Hail Shambord!" The bloody sword, the invincible hero, the remains of the enemies, the golden light from the sunset, and the godlike king. All of these things stimulated the soldiers even more. They raised their weapon and cheered. "Hail Shambord! Hail King Alexander! Hail!" While the soldiers were cheering, Fei suddenly turned around and pointed his sword at the enemy's base and yelled, "My warriors, cheer with me. Kill your dumbass enemy in the ass." The soldiers all laughed uncontrollably. They quickly realized that the king was not only worth of their respect, they could also relate to him, making them admire him even more. The soldiers rushed to the outer edge of the defensive wall and yelled at the enemy's base, "Kill your dumbass enemy in the ass. Bastards." The fear and sadness about the war had suddenly subsided. At this moment, "Alexander, how did you get here?" A surprised, yet worrisome and concerned voice came from Fei's back. Fei turned around. He saw Angela in a long purple dress. She was holding up the edges of her dress while rushing up the stairs of the defensive wall. The blonde-haired Emma was yelling and chasing behind her. She seemed a little mad. Fei threw away the sword that was still dripping blood, and turned his head around to wipe off the blood on his lips. After he felt that his appearance wouldn't scare the beautiful angel, he turned back and walked towards her. His walk turned into a sprint as he saw that Angela was about to fall from the stairs and he caught her just in time. The smooth sensation from touching her made Fei want to hug his beautiful fiancée really badly. "This place is too dangerous. You have to go back." Angela didn't see what had happened on the battlefield. There was sweat on her face, and her cheeks were completely red from running up the stairs. Tears built up in her eyes as she said that to Fei. 20 minutes ago, Angela returned to the palace bedroom with Emma after getting Emma's face treated. They were surprised to find out that Alexander had disappeared, and that there was a fully armored suit chopped into halves within the palace. They were really anxious and worried about Alexander and his whereabouts. Angela blamed herself over and over for leaving Alexander alone in the palace. They searched the entire palace, including the places Alexander loved to go to, but didn't find any clues. As they were getting desperate and about to cry, they heard a ton of soldiers yelling, "Hail King Alexander," on the defensive wall. Angela forgot about her own safety, and didn't listen to Emma's strong opposition, as she ran as fast as she could towards the battlefield. Fortunately, the battle had already ended for a while, and she spotted Alexander right away, fully clad in metal armor. "Are you injured?" Angela saw all the blood on Fei's armor. Fei laughed proudly and pointed at the corpses of the enemies, "It's all their blood. Don't look, these guys look disgusting." He quickly blocked Angela's view. He didn't want his pure fiancée to see all the blood and violence. This simple move by Fei had Angela's heart racing. At this moment, "Alexander, you are almost 18 years old. Can you stop making trouble for Angela? Do you know how dangerous this place is?" You almost made Angela cry. Emma had finally caught up to Angela. Although she also didn't have any idea about what happened, she began accusing Fei as she took a couple deep breaths. The stairs really tired her out. Back when Alexander was still a retard, Angela and Emma had treated him like a little brother, so when Emma got frustrated, she forgot about his status as a king and yelled at him like a big sister. However, Fei didn't get mad at all. He knew that they were just really worried about him, so he decided to tease Emma a little bit. He played dumb, and as if he was wronged, he said, "I didn't make any trouble. I am here to kill the enemies. Look, if you don't believe me, I am strong, and I even killed a lot of enemies." Emma became even angrier. "Who are you kidding? It was already embarrassing when you were knocked off of the defensive wall by an arrow the last time. Do you want to make more trouble this time? Kill the enemies. It would be great if you didn't mess up the defense for us. Let's go back. If you cause any more trouble, I'll let Angela slap your butt." "Slap my butt?" Fei's expression turned strange. When the old Alexander caused trouble, did Angela always slap his butt? Fei's thoughts were getting really inappropriate. "Okay, let's go back, Alexander. This place is too dangerous," said Angela. She held onto Fei's hand and began to walk in the direction of the king's palace. She thought to herself, "We have to leave this bloody place. I hope it won't traumatize poor Alexander." "No, Angela." Fei refused the caring intention of this beautiful girl. He fixed Angela's black hair, which had gotten messy from all the sprinting and stair climbing. Lowering his body to Angela's ear, he said, "Angela, do you remember? Earlier you told me that I have to be a brave king. Now, I will be here with my soldiers until we fight off the enemies. Although what Fei was saying was very honorable and moving, he was also trying his best to impress this girl. Heroes are what girls dream of, he thought to himself. That's enough. Alexander, you're causing trouble yet again. Emma didn't take Fei's words seriously. Her bright red face was fuming with anger, while her sapphire-like eyes were filled with frustration. Angela, Emma, let Alexander stay. The three-star warrior Lampard walked towards them. He patted Emma on the back to cool her down as he stared at Fei with a perplexed look. Lampard felt he couldn't get a hang of this little king anymore. He still hadn't digested all the shock that Alexander, who he had seen growing up and being laughed at by everyone, gave him today. What? Mr. Lampard, you. Both Angela and Emma didn't expect Lampard to say that, they were very surprised. Both of them knew that aside themselves in the Chambord castle, the only one who truly cared for Alexander was the three-star warrior Lampard, who had protected Alexander from when he was just a little kid. They couldn't believe that Lampard was allowing Alexander, who didn't have any defensive abilities, to stay on the dangerous defensive wall. Angela, Emma, take a look at the way the soldiers are looking at Alexander. Lampard pointed at the soldiers who were busy resting and setting up more defensive barriers. Looking at the elated Fei, he smiled and said, what Alexander said was true. If it wasn't for him who showed up just on time and saved the day, Chambord would already have been conquered. Angela, I have to agree. You were right when you said that Alexander would become the greatest king. All right, I'm a bit tired, I have to rest. He quickly turned around and left. However, no one noticed the thin stake of blood that was flowing out of his mouth. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 14, The Healing Facility. Now Angela and Emma noticed the abnormal surrounding atmosphere. The soldiers were looking at Alexander with complete respect. The king, who had previously been a laughing gag for everyone in Chambord, now seemed like a super idol that every soldier would sacrifice their own life for. This level of respect and worship from the soldiers was usually only directed toward Lampard. Hail King Alexander. Long live King Alexander. Fei felt great in front of Angela. He gave the surrounding soldiers a look that only brothers would understand. The soldiers laughed and were very cooperative, they all raised their arms and yelled, Hail King Alexander. Back then, every soldier felt that Alexander was a pile of shit compared to his fiancée Angela, who was a shining diamond. They felt sorry for Angela and believed that Alexander was not good enough for her. However, they now felt that, the pile of shit, Alexander was the only one in Chambord worthy of this diamond. To Angela and Emma, they never encountered such an atmosphere when Alexander was present. What happened? The two smart girls wouldn't wrap their heads around it. At this moment, My Majesty, Pierce almost didn't make it. Brooke, the second commander of the king's guards, rushed towards Fei. Although he knew that King Alexander was not a doctor nor even a priest from the church, he still had a tiny amount of hope in Fei, because of his amazing performance today. He hoped that Fei was still hiding some secrets under his sleeves. God, please. Give us one more miracle. Just one more miracle from King Alexander. Pierce. The white-haired man who had risked his life to destroy the two siege ladders appeared in Fei's mind. That man was a real warrior, no doubt about it, not just because of his strength, but also because of his mindset and willingness to sacrifice his life for something that he cherished. Brooke, take care of Angela and Emma for me, I will go and take a look. Fei tapped on Angela's hand and passionately told her to be careful. Then, he looked at Emma and raised his eyebrows to show off his new influence on the soldiers, including the commanders to her. Finally, a soldier led him towards the healing facility. Emma couldn't take Fei's teasing. She stared the Fei's back bitterly as he was rushing away. Then she turned around and said cutely, Uncle Brooke. What happened? Alexander seems like. That was the same question that Angela, who was blushing because of Fei's flirty behavior, wanted to know the answer to. Brooke smiled as he told them what had happened in the critical moment of the battle when Fei arrived. As the second commander of the king's guards, Brooke treated these two girls like his own daughters. In fact, almost every citizen at Chambord liked these two kind and mature girls. They all felt injustice towards Angela, the poor girl that was forced to marry this retarded king. But now, everyone who had witnessed or participated in the battle believed that only Alexander was the right fit for Angela. After listening to the entire story, Angela and Emma were shocked. Is our retarded Alexander really the hero of the story? Emma had her doubts. At Chambord Healing Facility. When Fei walked in, he was shocked. This place isn't the healing facility, is it? It looks like a pig pen. Fei thought to himself. A cold, moist, and moldy smell filled this seemingly abandoned place. There wasn't even a door to block the wind and the rain. The windows were blocked by rocks, dust and mud were everywhere. There was only some hay on the ground, while hundreds of heavily wounded soldiers were crying and groaning. 4 or 5 doctor personnel who were dressed in black and white robes walked between these soldiers. There was definitely a shortage of hands as these doctors were sprinting around, covered in sweat. "Your Majesty has arrived," yelled the soldier who led Fei. That had caught the attention of everyone in the facility, except those who were still in a coma or had fainted. The bravery and the power of King Alexander spread throughout the facility by the wounded soldiers, who were sent here after Fei had arrived on the battlefield. Many soldiers were imagining the exciting and manly battle scenes. Of course, some soldiers who didn't see Fei on the battlefield were a little skeptical. They wanted to see the king who turned from a retard into a hero in person. After seeing King Alexander arrive, the soldiers here were really pumped. Some soldier ignored the wounds on their bodies. They struggled to sit up to see the king, breaking the scabs that had just formed on their wounds. The ones who fought alongside Fei all cheered, "Hail King Alexander." Fei thanked the soldier who had led him to the facility, then quickly tried to comfort the soldiers who were struggling to sit up. He didn't know what to say. This was definitely not the right place to display his royal status. After seeing many young, mature, and old faces, their startling wounds, the blood from their body soaking into the soil beneath them. Something triggered Fei's heart. The glorious hero's legacies from Earth seemed to be relived by the people in front of him. Technically speaking, these soldiers were wounded from protecting him, some of them would be disabled forever. As a person from Earth, Fei wouldn't convince himself to accept this fact. If possible, he wished that he had fought the battle from the beginning alongside these soldiers. Humans seem to always contradict themselves, and Fei was a prime example. He was a coward and was extremely scared of death, but at this moment, he desired to fight and battle. Maybe he was affected by the endless violence and bloodiness in the Diablo world, or it might have been his animal instincts being triggered by the enemy's pressure. "My warriors, you have protected Chambord and you deserve the glory we have won today." Although Fei considered himself a talker, he didn't really know what to say at this point. When he bowed to all the soldiers in the healing facility, that sentence suddenly came out. This world was similar to medieval European feudal societies, under strict classes and hierarchies. A king bowing to a lower-classed soldier was unheard of, not even a retarded king. Sometimes, human emotions were simple. Many soldiers were touched by Fei's bow. Some soldiers who were complaining and spiteful as a result of their new disabilities, felt that it was worth it at that moment. After Fei comforted a majority of the wounded soldiers, he arrived in front of Pierce. He had entered a coma. The enemy left some of his energy inside of Pierce's body, when his shoulder was pierced by the rapier. The energy damaged Pierce's body and shocked his internal organs. Blood was flowing out of the wounded area non-stop. A young doctor was scrambling on the side attempting to stop it, but it was not effective. Fei now had the chance to observe the doctor's treatment in close detail. He was really disappointed. The doctors at Chambord didn't have the magical healing spells Fei had imagined. They could only perform simple first aid, including cleaning wounded areas and applying healing medicine to it. The effectiveness of these treatments was very limited. The life and death of the wounded soldiers depended all on their own physical attributes and the severity of their wounds. If they were lucky, they could stay alive; if not, then they couldn't do anything but to die. Novel title: Hail the King. Chapter 15, The Cure. For the severely injured soldiers who had no chance of survival, there was a way for them to be euthanized by using a small, yet deadly hammer to nail a needle into the weak spot on the back of their head. They would be killed instantly without experiencing any pain. For injuries like Pierce's, the euthanasia would be performed. However, after considering that Pierce was one of the strongest men in Chambord, the fact that he had destroyed 2 siege ladders during the battle, and the advice of the second commander Brooke, he wasn't euthanized yet. "How is he doing?" Fei asked the doctor, hoping to get some good news. "I'm very sorry, Your Majesty. We tried our best, but his internal organs were shocked and almost torn open. Even the high-class priests from the Holy Church can't do anything about it." Priests. This word caught Fei's attention, but now was not the right time to ask questions regarding that. Fei had to come up with a solution to this problem. 2 other doctors came up and bowed to Fei. One was holding a wooden tray. A small hammer and a bizarre-looking needle were placed on the tray. They were the tools for euthanasia. Pierce was the last severely injured person in the facility. Although he fainted, everyone could see that his body was still experiencing a lot of pain. These injuries might not have been able to kill him right away, but the blood from his wounds and mouth were flowing like water pouring out of a bottle. An older-looking doctor lifted Pierce off the ground. The other doctor placed the nail at the back of Pierce's head and raised the hammer with his other arm. Wait. Fei had to stop the actions of the doctors. He just couldn't let a real warrior die like this. Real warriors deserved to die on the battlefield. A death like this would bring shame upon a man like Pierce. Moreover, Fei didn't want to let Pierce die. But, how can I save him? Faye had to think fast. At this moment, as if Pierce sensed the tension in the room, he woke up. He saw King Alexander standing in front him, as well as the doctors. Eventually, his eyes finally focused onto the hammer. A smile shined on his face. Is it my turn now? Go ahead. Pierce didn't say anything to Faye. He fainted before Faye surprised everyone, so he didn't know that the retarded king was now officially the hero of Chambord. The doctor raised the hammer again. Wait. Faye stopped it again. He looked down at Pierce fading in and out of consciousness, and then an idea flashed through his mind. Pierce, I know how to save you, but you may have to endure a ton of pain. He said. You. King Alexander, this joke is not funny. If you do care for your soldiers, then please spare some bread for my poor daughter Louise. Although Pierce wasn't fully conscious, he didn't trust the king in front of him one bit. Trusting the words of a retard. Do you think I'm a retard too? Only when he spoke of his daughter did Faye see the worries in the man, who wasn't even afraid of the enemy sword. What? You scared of pain? Faye lowered his body and scoffed at Pierce. He did it on purpose, it worked like a charm. Pierce easily fell for it. The tempered man was enraged. Like a lion whose mate had been taken, Pierce struggled to sit up, causing all his wounds to bleed once more. I'm scared of pain. Faye was scared. This man really had a strong sense of pride. Faye didn't want to irritate Pierce too much or he would literally die from bleeding. Endure it if you are not afraid of the pain. Do it for your daughter. He said that to Pierce before he left the healing facility. Just as he walked out of the facility, Brooke had arrived with Angela and Emma. Angela's and Emma's cheeks were really red. They stared at Faye when they saw him. They still couldn't believe what they had heard. Your Majesty, Pierce. Brooke asked with hope. There might be a way to save him. Faye wasn't too sure about his idea. I can only try my best. If I'm lucky, Pierce won't die. Great. Faye's answer was beyond Brooke's expectation. As a commander of the King's Guards, Brooke had seen a lot of death and injuries. He knew exactly how severe Pierce's injuries were. Death was almost guaranteed. He only asked the king due to desperation, but he didn't expect that the king to really have a cure. Oh Brooke, one more thing. Why is the healing facility so poor? Don't we have a better place for our warriors to stay in? Faye was very unsatisfied with this so-called healing facility. This question caught Brooke off guard. He wanted to say something, but he stopped himself. Emma took deep breaths behind Brooke. She wasn't used to all the sprinting. After hearing Faye's question, she didn't hold back at all. She said sarcastically, isn't this all you're doing? If it wasn't for your Majesty listening to that Gil's words, and selling all the valuable items in the healing facilities to have some fun, expelling all the doctors and even taking off all the windows, the healing facility wouldn't be looking like this. Faye didn't know what to say. I really was a retard and a dumbass back then. He thought to himself. Are there any other larger places that are more suitable for keeping all the wounded soldiers? Faye asked Brooke without saying anything back to Emma. The church at Chambord, as well as the head minister Barzil's mansion are suitable, but Brooke hesitated as he continued speaking. But what? Faye was curious. Brooke didn't know how to respond to the question. The two places that Uncle Brooke mentioned do have enough space for these soldiers, but Alexander, you can't move them there. Angela, who was previously quiet, explained patiently. The priests left Chambord Castle and the church was locked down. We don't have the authority to use it, or we will be heavily punished by the Holy Church. There aren't any empires on this Azeroth continent that dare go against the Holy Church's rules and orders. Head Minister Barzil's mansion is not very convenient right now. The explanation was pretty vague. Faye still didn't fully understand everything. Although he had inherited Alexander's previous memories, his understanding of this world was still minimal. He saw that Angela was very serious and wanted to tease her a bit. Is the Holy Church that powerful? Even a king can't order them. Blonde-haired Emma began to object. Faye again. When the priests in the castle were leaving, even the enemies that surrounded our castle didn't dare stop them. They had to let them out respectfully. What do you think about the Holy Church's power now? Even the most powerful level 9 empires don't dare to go against the Holy Church so blatantly. Faye laughed nervously and didn't stress on that question anymore. His knowledge regarding the continent was just too little. If he continued asking stupid questions, the others might have gotten suspicious of him. He quickly shifted the attention of the three people away from that subject. All right then, are there any other places aside from the church and head minister Barzil's mansion? Brooke shook his head. Angela and Emma did the same. They didn't have any good ideas either. After seeing this, Faye rubbed his chin. He was considering Barzil's mansion. Barzil's son Gil had tried to kill me. If he was like that, his father probably isn't someone bright as well. Which place? Faye, Angela, and Brooke were all surprised. Forcing these kinds of people to share their property, by using his authority as the king, would not cause Faye to feel any guilt. At this moment. I know another place. Emma yelled suddenly. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 16, The Insane Discovery. As Emma stared at Faye, a mischievous smile covered her face. The front half of your Majesty's palace. There's enough space for all the soldiers. It depends on whether or not you are willing to do so. Faye's eyes brightened. Great idea. That's it. Brooke, go ahead and organize the remaining soldier. Make sure that you're able to move all the wounded soldier to the front half of my palace. Also, notify all the doctors. It doesn't matter how severe the injuries are, tell them to try their best to maintain the lives of the wounded soldiers. I will handle the rest. Brooke was shocked. Your Majesty, you can't. Why not? Faye laughed. They bled for me in the kingdom of Chambord, so why can't I provide them with a better place to stay and be treated? Emma was stunned. She proposed this solution not to solve the problem, but to childishly confront Faye. She didn't expect Faye to listen to her. Hey Alexander. Are you sure about this? It was unheard of that a king would offer his palace as healing facility for the wounded soldiers. Faye purposely rubbed Emma's head and made a mess of the hair. Of course, thanks for your suggestion, kiddo. You are the kiddo here. Angela didn't say a word. She simply smiled as she watched Faye and Emma play with each other. Her mood was unprecedentedly happy. How long had it been since she was this happy? Angela didn't know the answer to that question herself. The way she was looking at Faye was getting brighter and brighter. The wounded soldiers were quickly moved to the front half of the king's palace. Food, water, wool blankets, and clothes were distributed to all of them under Angela's and Emma's lead. Faye had also generously given out a portion of his treasure and wealth to motivate the soldiers. At this dire moment, morale had to be high. Aside from spiritual encouragement and motivation, there had to be some material benefits too. As a student who had taken psychology courses before, Faye knew what he had to do. The cheering of, "Hail King Alexander," resounded throughout Chambord Castle once more. Some wounded soldiers were touched and started crying, and swore to devote their lives towards following King Alexander's commands. Faye's action had definitely won over the soldiers' respect even more. In this world where the lives of commoners were basically worthless, it was pretty easy to win over the support the people. After organizing the wounded soldiers, Faye handed control over to the military guru, Brooke, to plan duties such as the guarding and securing the defensive wall and putting up more barriers. He returned to the back of the palace and ordered that no one was to enter his room. He had to check on his injuries. Luckily, they weren't too severe. His first battle wasn't bad. He wasn't injured at all when fighting the two 1-star warriors. Only when he was trying to take on the 3-star warrior Landis did he get injured. He went head-to-head with the exploding sun strike and only puked some blood. The most severe injury was when Faye's shoulder was pierced by Landis' sword. Landis' fire energy had entered Faye's body through the sword and shocked his internal organs, an injury similar to Pierce. Faye took a gamble when he intentionally let Landis pierce him. He brought the strength and abilities of the barbarian to this world, thinking that the defense and armor of the barbarian was also probably brought to this world. It would minimize the damage from Landis. In fact, he won the gamble. The energy of a 3-star warrior should have been able to shatter Faye's organs into pieces, but due to barbarian's sick armor and defense, the organs were only shocked. There weren't any deadly effects. Of course, Faye had to do that. In that situation, Faye couldn't think of another way to temporarily defeat Landis except for tricking him. If Faye didn't force Landis off of the defensive wall, he would have become just another soul under Landis' sword by now. It wasn't that Faye wasn't scared of death. It was just that he was too scared of death, so he had to risk everything he got. After checking his injuries, Faye began doing something very important. He sat on the bed and tried to enter the Diablo world. If he wanted to save the lives of his soldiers, he had to enter the Diablo world once again. Faye's idea was simple. If he could bring the abilities and attributes from the character in the Diablo world to real life, then he could probably bring the items and potions into the real world. If he could bring the healing potions, which could literally heal all the health of a dying character in the Diablo world, into the real world, then Pierce and all other soldiers' lives could be saved. After thinking about that, Faye couldn't wait to enter the Diablo world. He meditated on the bed. He concentrated as he tried to remember how he entered the Diablo world for the first time. He tried to communicate with the strange voice inside his head. The result surprised Faye. There was a quick response. Gamer Faye seeking approval to enter Diablo world. Soul scan valid. Game time verifying. Excess time left over. Request approved. Countdown 3, 2, 1. Enter. The cold yet mysterious voice spoke. Fei had the pleasure to travel through the Stargate again, as he felt dizzy and a strange wave went through his body. The scene in front of Fei surprised him. He remembered that he was still in the Den of Evil on Blood Moor. He was expecting to be sent back to the same place, but it definitely wasn't the case. He was not at the Den of Evil, nor Rogue Encampment. It wasn't even in the Diablo world. He was in front of a 3D projected screen. On the screen, there were 7 playable characters: Amazon, Assassin, Barbarian, Druid, Necromancer, Paladin, and Sorceress. They were all standing in front of a bonfire. Every character was real. Fei could even hear them breathing. It felt like there were 7 people standing in front of Fei. Is this the selection screen in the game? Why am I here? Could it? As Fei was thinking, he saw a button under the screen. Create a new character. Fei was stunned at first, he couldn't control his excitement. Create a new character. Does that mean I could play other classes and bring their abilities into the real world? An imaginary door opened in front of Fei. He could see his bright future. There were numerous opportunities. If he was a level 99 character in Hell game mode and was able to use those abilities in the real world, how powerful could he become? All he could think about were the possibilities. Hundreds of abilities from all 7 classes would definitely create a big storm in the real world, and no one would be able to defeat him. This is insane. Fei couldn't hold himself together. He had to try it out to be sure. He thought about it and decided to become a fancy mage this time. Instantly, a beautiful woman representing the class Sorceress stepped forward. She waved her powerful wand and lightning came down from the sky, then she bowed to Fei. The bottom on the screen changed to Confirm Selection. Fei pressed yes. The screen began disappearing and his vision blurred. It was the sign of entering the Diablo world. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 17, The God of Toleration. The Diablo system didn't give Fei much time to regret his choice. Right after a second, everything in front of Fei had changed. Fei felt the zero gravity again from traveling through the time tunnel. His vision blurred for a second. The next thing he knew, he had appeared in Rogue Encampment and was at the spot where new players would spawn. The sky was still dark and the rain continued pouring down. The Rogue Encampment was completely quiet. Fei found out that when he changed his class to Sorceress, everything went back to zero. It seemed as if he had restarted the game. He went to the High Priestess Akra to receive the quest Den of Evil, and the intelligent women treated Fei like a stranger while giving him the quest. After he got the quest, he went back to the place where he spawned. He suddenly remembered something. He looked down his pants and hoped that he could touch something with his hand. After a brief moment. Hugh, okay. So I didn't become a female. It would have been way too cruel. Fei was very happy. Although the Sorceress class was made to be a female in the Diablo world, his character appearance was based off Alexander in the real world. There were some minor changes, but he looked similar to the barbarian Fei. He was wearing a coarse gray robe and holding a 2-yard-long tree branch wand. These 2 items were given to Fei when he spawned. They were pretty cheap and powerless. Quickly, the NPC Warav had rushed over again and started talking. Greetings, stranger. I'm not surprised to see. With his previous experience, Fei ignored him and walked away. At this point, Fei was certain that his hypothesis was correct. He could choose all the classes in the Diablo world, but he would only know whether or not he could bring their abilities into the real world after he exited the game world. After he proved his hypothesis, he decided to exit the Sorceress character mode. It wasn't that he didn't want to be a mage, but rather it was better to concentrate all his resources into one class for now. Chambord was under a real threat. He decided to focus his time on leveling up the barbarian Fei, so he could be more useful for the next battle. As he was thinking about exiting the mode, he was automatically transferred to the 3D character selection screen without pressing any buttons. Damn. I can control everything now by just thinking about them. He thought about choosing the level 5 barbarian character and his vision blurred again, along with the feeling of zero gravity. He had entered the Diablo world again as a level 5 barbarian. This is cool. Fei thought. He could simply think about what he wanted to do, and there wouldn't be any need for button pressing. The place he appeared in was the Den of Evil. After he killed all the monsters in the den and completed the quest, he used a town portal scroll before he was kicked out of the Diablo world. The bright blue oval was still buzzing in front of him when he re-entered this world. There were still some items on the ground. Fei checked his item slot. All the valuable items were picked up by him, and the items on the ground were pretty much worthless. He stepped into the blue portal and appeared at Rogue Encampment. The dark and rainy weather had stopped, and sunlight shined onto Rogue Encampment. Although the sky was still a little dim and gloomy, like how the polluted skies on Earth made people feel depressed, the fresh, clean air lightened up Faye's mind. Faye went directly to the priestess Akira. The same dialogue as the original game occurred and Faye was awarded 1 new skill points. Faye put this point into weapon mastery without thinking. There wasn't enough time for Faye to distribute the points evenly among all the abilities. Weapon mastery allowed him to defeat the star-ranked warriors with godlike axe techniques, so leveling that ability up would significantly improve his combat effectiveness. After he did that, he began bothering Akira. Honorable Priestess Akira, I have a few questions. I know what you want to ask, young traveler. This spiritual leader of Rogue Encampment seemed like she had seen through Faye. She smiled, I'm willing to answer your questions, but you have to know, at Rogue Encampment, everything has a price, so the key is. Do you have anything that interests me? Damn, this woman is direct. Faye was surprised by the brutal honesty of Akira. He thought that the High Priestess wouldn't be moved by anything. Who knew that as a spiritual leader of Rogue Encampment, she would directly ask for bribes? Faye felt that his respect for this woman had sunk. Okay, can gold coins be used as a price? Faye asked. Yes, the smile on Akira's face brightened up even more. Every answer will cost you 2,000 gold coins. Of course, some answers will cost more based on the question. You might not be able to afford them at this point. Faye was excited that Akira agreed to answer his question. However, when he checked his item slot, he was really disappointed. He only had 1,100 gold coins. He couldn't even afford one answer. He had to come up with something. Faye felt like swearing, damn this Akira. 2,000 gold coins per answer. Why don't you go and rob a bank? Looks like I have to sell my items. Wait. Items. Faye saw the 2 blue magic items. If gold coins can be used to buy an answer, then items could probably be used too, right? Although he was complaining about the price of the answers, he didn't show any of that on his face. He turned to Akira and asked respectfully, Honorable Priestess Akira, I don't have enough gold coins. Can these 2 items be used as a substitute? He brought out the Grim Wand and the Javelin. Akira's eyes brightened up. Magic items. Yeah, they can be used as substitutes. It has been a while since items of this quality have appeared in Rogue Encampment. Young traveler, this blazing Grim Wand and this athlete's Javelin are worth 8,000 gold coins. I can answer 4 of your questions. Akira was a high priestess and had the ability to identify items without using identify scrolls, so she could call out the names of the items by scanning them with her bare eyes. When she was identifying the items, she looked very serious and Faye felt a hint of sacredness in her. In addition to the purple nun robe she was wearing, she was totally different from the tricky merchant Faye had in mind. Only 8,000 gold coins. That's way too low. Faye yelled in exaggeration. He actually didn't know the right price for these 2 magic items. Because of Faye's bad impression of Akira, he felt the price that Akira spoke of was lower than the standard. Honorable Priestess Akira, it's not right for a spiritual leader like you to speak of gold coins all the time. How about this, let's trade these 2 items for 5 answers. If I get more items like these in the future, I will take them to you as well. Akira was defeated by the shamelessness of the traveler. He spoke of the gold coins as if they were filthy on one hand, yet increased the value of his items by 2,000 on the other. She thought about Faye's suggestion and accepted it. Many years had passed and the man in front of her was the only traveler that could step into Rogue Encampment, and he was the first to survive on Blood Moor. Although there were some skillful female rogues, they could barely protect the encampment. There was no way that they could survive on Blood Moor and bring back all these valuable items. Also, Akira felt that as time passed by, the power of Diablo was corroding the energy of this world faster and faster. She had many important plans that this young traveler needed to complete. Thanks for your generosity, Honorable Priestess Akira. My first question is, how did I come into this world? Young traveler. Akira stared at Faye strangely and spoke, I don't know where you came from, but I could sense that you are not from this world. However, I'm sure that your arrival was all God's decree. This world needs you. What? God's decree. This is your answer. Faye didn't know how to respond. Yes, this is the answer. Akira nodded seriously. Faye almost fainted. He was outraged. God's decree. This bullshit is worse than not having an answer. Faye was fascinated by science when he was on Earth and didn't believe in ghosts or gods. Akira's answer to him was completely BS. However, Faye couldn't do anything about it. He was dealing with the leader of Rogue Encampment. He had to endure his rage. He quickly came up with the second question. So for the second question, if I'm killed by the monsters on the moor, will I be revived? This was the most important question to Faye. There were a list of quests in Diablo World. It would only get harder as he leveled up. He would have to face all the powerful demons from hell one day, and death would probably be unpreventable. So, before his death actually happened, he had to make sure that it was the same as the original game, where characters revived after their deaths. Akira stared at Faye strangely again. Young man, I have to admit that you know way more about this world than I expected. It was true that long time ago, the travelers and warriors revived after their death by the redemption of the gods. Akira slowed down as she spoke, but time had passed on for too long. Diablo's power is corrupting this world every second. It has been almost 60 years since a traveler has stepped foot into Rogue encampment. So, the answer to this question is, I don't know. Fate was shocked. You don't know. Does this count as an answer? Yes, because I have told you all I know. There was fire burning in Faye's eyes, smoke coming out his mouth and steam coming out his nose. What the hell? This priestess isn't joking with me, is she? Faye was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He had to tolerate. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 18, Magic Items Again. Faye tried to hold himself together and squeezed the third question out of his mouth. I want to know if I can bring items in this world into my world. You know that I mean, right? Honorable Priestess Akira. Faye was ready. If Akira said anything like, it's God's decree, or, I don't know, Faye would literally punch Akira. Consequences. Screw that. Faye thought. He didn't care what the consequences were for fighting with the leader of Rogue encampment. Fortunately, Akira's answer wasn't anything like that. Young traveler, you have memorized this rule. In this world, everything has a price. If you have and are willing to trade items that even the gods envy, you can get anything you want. So you mean, if I can pay for it, I can take it to my world, right? Young man, this is your fourth question. You damn woman, you're so cheap. Faye cursed in his mind. Although he was pissed, he appeared respectful towards Akira. He shook his head, no, of course not. Faye was honestly scared by the greediness of Akira. He quickly asked his fourth question, why am I forced to leave this world after a few hours? What's that voice inside my head? That is God's direction, my child. When your mental strength is strong enough, you will get to stay in this world forever. But now, it's obviously not the case. With your current mental strength, you can only stay in this world for 4 hours. Mental strength. So that's the key. Faye now understood. After Faye got the answer, he turned around and quickly walked. He was afraid that he would do inexplicable things to Akira. Who said that NPCs were dumb, and that their only purpose was to accelerate the plot of the game. Faye trusted this concept too hard and suffered a big loss while negotiating with Akira. Young traveler, you still have one last chance to ask a question. Akira gloated. I will save my last question for now. I will come and ask you when I get a question that's worth 2,000 gold. Looks like I have to be more careful when dealing with NPCs in this world, or they're going to suck me dry like a vampire. Damn, they're scarier than the monsters on the moor. After talking with Akira, Faye decided to level up his character. Chambord Castle was under serious danger, so he had to increase his power right away. Even if he couldn't defend the castle, he still could protect the people that were close to him. The fastest way to level up was not to slay monster non-stop to gain experience, but to complete various quests. The experience he could gain from it was way more efficient, so before Faye left Rogue encampment, he went to Xianxia, the military leader at the encampment. From her, Faye received his second quest. Sister's Burial Grounds. Faye had to kill the blood raven who lived there. As the military leader at the encampment, Xianxia had a lot of well-trained female rogues under her command. In the original game, when players completed the quest, they would gain the trust of this military leader, and she would give them a rogue mercenary to fight alongside the players. I wonder if these female rogues are as pretty as the ones in the original game. Faye's EQ plummeted when he thought of girls. He tried to peek into the tents behind Xianxia, where the female rogues lived. Light crisp giggles came from the tents and it skyrocketed Faye's curiosity. However, the damn curtains on the tents blocked Faye's view, and he didn't see a thing. Faye had to leave it behind and left Rogue encampment. Blood Raven was a traitor of the Rogue encampment, and a corrupted rogue. She lived in a burial ground on the cold plain. She was not only a strong boss, but there were also a ton of monster that guarded her. As Faye left the encampment and traveled through Blood Moor, he killed numerous monsters. After around 2 hours of traveling, he finally entered the cold plain under the heavy rain. At that moment, Faye had leveled up his barbarian character to level 7. Like a lot of the RPG, you needed more experience and time to level up as your level got higher. It took Fei less than 3 hours to go from level 0 to level 5, but it took more than 2 hours for him to level up to level 7 from level 5. Just like its name, the cold plane was way colder than the blood moor. It was like going from Brazil directly to the North Pole. The monsters were stronger, too. Except for the fallen shaman and vampire, which were the common monsters, there was a new type of monster, corrupt rogue. They were basically rogues that had absorbed death energy from hell and turned evil. They used spears and swords to attack Fei when they saw him appear at Cold Plain. They rushed towards Fei in groups. When one died, it screamed and called for more corrupt rogues to show up. There was no way that Fei could have avoided them, so he manned up and battled his way out of it. After an hour, Fei had finally arrived at the burial ground where Blood Raven lived. There was 1 hour left, until he would reach his 4-hour time limit per day in the Diablo world. There was enough time for Fei to complete the quest, before he would get kicked out of this world. But before that, Fei checked his status and decided to do one thing. Go back to the encampment to fix his weapons and armor, as well as purchase some potions. The battles at Cold Plain had worn out Fei's items. The durability and effectiveness of his items decreased a lot. If he wanted to fight the boss of Cold Plain, Blood Raven like that, he was better off poking a tiger's ass with a stick. It would be an easier way to die. Fei opened his item slot and used a town portal scroll. Fei stepped in as the bright blue oval portal appeared. After the buzz, Fei was teleported back to Rogue Encampment. From Fei's memories of the original game, there was a woman called Xianxia, a NPC blacksmith who sold and repaired weapons and armor. Fei checked his mini-map and found Xianxia a couple tents away. She was a young female who looked around 18 years old. Although Xianxia was pretty, she didn't have the appearance of a delicate yet fragile female, probably because she was a blacksmith. She looked valiant, but didn't seem happy. It seemed like there was something bothering her. She wasn't surprised about Fei's arrival. After Fei talked to her, his axe and armor were repaired at the cost of 20 gold coins. Fei also sold the items that he didn't need from the monsters to Xianxia. He found out that for the same items, he got more gold coins for them from Xianxia than from Akira. That priestess is not a good egg. Fei's resentment towards Akira grew even greater. He swore that he was never going to sell his items to Akira again. Xianxia didn't seem like she wanted to chat, so Fei thanked her politely and went back to Cold Plain to fight the boss Blood Raven. There wasn't much time left. After 50 minutes, a mournful female scream disturbed the quiet plains. Fei was wounded all over his body. After the tense battle with Blood Raven, one of the strongest evil rogues, she had finally died under Fei's axe. Fei shamelessly dragged out the fight. He ran from the boss when his health was low and battled the boss after he used health potions. Although it was sneaky, there was no other way for Fei to win that fight. Blood Raven was too powerful. After Blood Raven died, numerous lightning bolts came out of her body. It quickly occupied the whole burial ground as if it was the end of world. However, Fei was not hurt by the lightning at all. It seemed like the lightning's purpose was not to cause damage. After a while, the lightning disappeared. A strange scene appeared. Above the corpse of Blood Raven, an illusory female figure, like an angel, raised up the sky. She looked like a female rogue. It must have been the poor soul of this rogue before she had fallen. Fei thought. My actions must have saved her. After a second of seriousness, he quickly checked out the corpse. Theoretically, after killing bosses like Blood Raven, magic items would be rewarded. Just as Fei expected, blue lights flickered under the corpse. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 18, Minor Healing Potion. I'm rich. 2 magic items. Fei picked up the 2 items. Although he was expecting it, he was still extremely excited. As he was about to take a detailed look of the 2 items, the cold, mysterious voice appeared again. Approaching the time limit of the day, please prepare for exit. Finally. However, this time the voice didn't start the 3-second countdown right away. It gave Fei some time to get ready. I was waiting for you for a while. Fei thought. It was true that Fei was focused on killing the monsters, but he was also waiting for this voice to appear. Fei was afraid that he would lose this opportunity, so he yelled to the sky, wait. I have something to ask you. I want to exchange some healing potions and take them to my world. You know what I mean, right? Tell me, what do I have to pay as a price? At the same time, Fei was concentrating on trying to communicate with the mysterious voice inside his head. However, the voice didn't respond right away. Fei's question was followed by a moment of complete silence. For Fei, who was in need of an answer, these 4 seconds of silence felt like a decade. Finally, after the 5th second, the cold, mysterious voice spoke again. As you wish, minor healing potion. The conversion price is 3,000 gold coins, with the conversion success rate of 25%. The gold coins will be deducted from the item slot of the gamer. If gold coins are not sufficient, items can be used as a substitute with 80% of their actual value. Please confirm the conversion. Countdown, 10, 8, 5 inch. Yes. Confirm, convert 3 bottles of minor healing potion. Faye was excited that it could be done. Insufficient gold coins, insufficient items, please restate the converting items or quantities. Countdown, 4, 3 inch. Convert 1 bottle of minor healing potion. Faye was anxious. Insufficient gold coins, sufficient items 25% conversion success rate, calculating, conversion successful, maximum gaming time reached, exiting. A clear sound entered Faye's ear. Faye's vision blurred as the world started twisting in his eyes, turning completely black within seconds. Faye exhaled as he jumped off of his bed. He looked around and realized that he was back at the king's palace. His fiancée, Angela, was sitting on the side of the bed and stared at him with her blue, ocean-like eyes. Worry covered her pretty face. "Alexander, you are finally awake." After Faye waking up, her worry disappeared. She was so happy that her voice was shaking. Your left shoulder was bleeding. "Oh, did you just have a nightmare? Your body was shaking vigorously when you were asleep and you were sweating a lot. I was worried that you..." There wasn't much logic in Angela's sentences, but Faye felt the concern from the girl in front of him. Her concern wasn't because he was now the hero of Chambord. Neither was it similar to the respect and the care she showed towards Brooke and the soldiers. It was a simple emotion from Angela's heart. She didn't care if Faye was the retard back then or a hero now. Angela, this angelic girl, would always care for him. That concern and care caused a special feeling to well up inside Faye's heart. Maybe this was directed only for the old Alexander, but Faye still had a great impression of Angela. Although Faye liked pretty girls, it was typical for a male. Faye was actually very old school and was never promiscuous. However, Angela's kindness had touched Faye. Faye was fond of her. What girl could be so caring and nice to a man who she knew was a retard, and would be her future husband? Why was Angela Alexander's fiancée? Faye didn't know, but that didn't affect his decision at this point. He was going to marry her no matter what and give her the happiness she deserved. "Relax, Angela, I had recovered a long time ago." Faye smiled at Angela. He took off his armor and opened his shirt. The wound that Landis' sword had left was almost completely healed. There was only a tiny red speck there indicating that an injury had taken place. That was proof of Faye's hypothesis. After going to the Diablo world, any type of injury on his body will magically recover. Angela blushed as she checked Faye's wounds in detail. Noticing no problems, she was finally relieved. When Alexander was a retard, Angela subconsciously treated him as a little kid and didn't have any other kinds of feelings for him. But now that Alexander had suddenly become normal, she realized that she couldn't keep her cool in front of him. Every time she thought about the identity of the man in front of him, her fiancé, her heart began pounding really quickly. Angela didn't know that her blushing face had stunned Faye. He couldn't look away. Neither of them said anything. It was completely quiet in the palace. The atmosphere was becoming more enchanting and mesmerizing. What a wonderful moment. Faye thought pleasantly. However, just as Faye was enjoying the mood, it was suddenly destroyed. The door to Faye's room was pushed open. Emma rushed in. Emma didn't know that she had interrupted this special moment. Not noticing Faye's hateful stares, she yelled, "Alexander, how is your cure coming along? Uncle Pierce can't hold any longer." Shit. Faye finally remembered his most urgent task. He looked around, and finally found the item that he had paid a lot for lying on his bed, minor healing potion. Thank God that the magic potion that could save one from dying in the Diablo world was successfully converted into the real world. Faye held the little bottle in his hand and carefully observed it. It was more like a glass jar about the size of an orange. The red liquid in it had a low viscosity, just like Coke. This is too little. It's probably not enough to cure Pierce and the 200 wounded soldiers. Faye thought as he saw the quantity of the potion in the bottle. What should I do? Let me try the effect of this potion. If it's as magical in this world as it's in the Diablo world, maybe diluting the potion can save all their lives. What are you waiting for? Let's go. Emma didn't let Faye think too much. She tried to drag Faye to Pierce. Angela finally calmed down and was about to follow them, but Faye turned around and said to her, "Angela, can you go and help me to prepare 2 pots of clean water? I will need it later." "Why do you need pots and clean water?" Emma was like curious baby. "I will help Angela with that. Alexander, you go and check out Uncle Pierce, he can't hold on any longer. Faye arrived at the front half of the palace. Wounded soldiers filled the place and groaned non-stop. Luckily, most of them received great care and their spirits were better than when they were at the crowded healing facility. Except for the doctors, some women were called to the palace to take care of all the wounded soldiers. King Alexander's kindness had made it clear to all the people of Chambord that everyone had to be united and work together if they wanted to survive this dangerous ordeal. Your Majesty has arrived. After seeing Faye arrive, someone yelled, causing Faye to become the center of attention right away. What happened on the battlefield had quickly spread throughout Chambord Castle. Many people had concluded that the retarded king was blessed by the god of war and became the savior of Chambord. Therefore, Alexander naturally became the spokesman of the god of war and was respected and worshipped. Everyone was excited and wanted to greet Faye. Someone even kneeled down and kissed Faye's boots. This scared Faye, damn. Hey chill. Although Faye enjoyed showing off and being worshipped, this much enthusiasm and passion was too much for him. After finally escaping from the crowd, he heard someone crying beside him. Novel title, Hail the King. Chapter 20, Oscar-worthy acting. Faye traced the source of the sound. At the corner on his right-hand side, a thin, red-haired little girl was holding someone while crying. Faye took a closer look. The person who the little girl was holding was the severely wounded Pierce. The second commander of the king's guards, Brooke, was beside them looking worried. He kept talking to the little girl to comfort her. Your Majesty. After seeing Faye, Brooke was excited. He stood up and bowed, did you find a cure? He looked at Faye nervously, he was afraid that Faye would shake his head and say something disappointing. Pierce was at his limit, he could probably hold on another 10 minutes, but that would be it. Faye saw the humble Brooke getting extremely nervous and decided to tease him a little. He didn't respond to Brooke's question. Instead, he pointed at the red-haired little girl. She is Louise. She is Pierce's daughter Louise. Brooke tried to hold his anxiety and introduced the little girl to Faye. Faye nodded without saying anything. So this is the daughter that Pierce was worrying about when he was severely injured. Faye thought. Unlike Pierce, who was an insensitive tough guy, little Louise was very cute. With tears in her eyes, she could melt everyone's heart. Her red hair was very noticeable too. It reminded Faye of Hermione from Harry Potter. However, Faye felt that Louise wasn't that very approachable as a kid. She was cold and seemed way too mature for a 12-year-old girl. Are you the one that Uncle Brooke said can save my father? Although Louise was crying, when she felt someone walking towards her, she looked up. There were still tears in her eyes, and Faye could tell that she was heartbroken. However, she said in a voice unfit for her age, if you can save my father, I'm willing to be your lover forever. Faye was shocked. He didn't know what to say. The hell? Are all the kids in this world that precocious? I ain't no harem king. Faye thought to himself. He didn't want to talk to this kid anymore. It was more challenging for Faye to face her than one of the bosses in the Diablo world. Faye sat down beside Pierce, who relapsed into a heavy coma. He took out the minor healing potion and carefully poured one drop of the potion into Pierce's mouth. Whether it would work or not was going to be tested at this moment. Faye was nervous, Brooke and Louise were even more nervous. All three of them stared at Pierce. Their hearts were pounding extremely quickly, hoping that it would work. Time passed slowly. The silence was like poison, no one dared to breathe. Eventually, Pierce, who was struggling to breathe, began inhaling and exhaling rapidly. His pale face was getting red and his wounds were recovering at a ridiculous speed visible to the human eyes. Brooke and Louise were shocked. Their jaws dropped subconsciously. Although they didn't know what the red liquid was that King Alexander dropped into Pierce's mouth, it was super effective. The healing power of the liquid was beyond their wildest dreams. Unimaginable. Spectacular. Unheard of. It was better than any healing spell from the high priests of the Holy Church. Brooke and Louise looked at each other and then stared at Faye. They were almost sure that Faye was a living god. Faye was shocked by the terrifying healing power of the minor healing potion as well. He wasn't expecting that a single drop of the potion could be so effective. Obviously, if Pierce emptied the bottle, he could easily recover 100% and fight another battle. However, the impact of that would be too shocking to everyone around, so Faye didn't do it. Faye observed Pierce's condition. He found that after one drop of the potion, the wounds had all recovered and Pierce's face wasn't that pale anymore, but he was still unconscious. That's probably the max healing one drop can do. This gave Faye a rough measurement of the potion's healing power, so he dropped another drop into Pierce's mouth. The effect was instant this time. As soon as the drop landed in Pierce's mouth, Pierce woke up from the coma. He groaned as he opened his eyes. He was confused when he saw the three of them standing in front of him. He shook his head as he tried to remember what had happened. He remembered that he was about to die, but somehow, the unbearable pain throughout his body stopped and he could breathe again. What happened? After seeing Pierce speak, Brooke was finally relieved. Louise happily shouted as she jumped into the arms of Pierce. At this moment, the 12-year-old girl felt secure and happy like never before. "Father, you're alive. Thank God, the king saved you." Louise couldn't even finish speaking. She was so happy that she started sobbing. It was a terrifying feeling for her to lose the only loved one she had left. It scarred her soul and she didn't want to experience that ever again. Pierce seemed to realize what had happened in his daughter's sobs. The brave warrior didn't say a word, he tightly hugged his daughter. After feeling the fear and excitement in his daughter's face, a drop of the hero's tear fell from his eyes. Faye looked at this happy father and daughter family and smiled. Faye quietly left. He didn't want to interrupt the special moment the family was having. 2 drops of the minor healing potion brought Pierce back from the Grim Reaper's hand. This gave Faye a better understanding of the effectiveness of the potion, similar to the effectiveness in the Diablo world. This made Faye more confident in what he was about to do next. "Alexander, the water and the pots are ready," Emma yelled. Angela and Emma each carried a pot of water and rushed over from the back half of the palace. Faye took the pots, one in each hand, and ordered Brooke to get a table. After placing the pots on the table, Faye kneeled before the table. Angela and the rest of the people didn't know what was going on, so they stared with curiosity. "Time to show off my acting skills." Faye was laughing on the inside, but he appeared very serious. He placed his palms together in front of his chest and closed his eyes. A strange, mysterious language flew out of Faye's mouth that no one had heard of before. His expression was very serious, as if he was praying to a mysterious god. Although no one understood what the king was talking about, his serious expression influenced the people around him. Angela dragged Emma to kneel down first and then Brooke and the rest of the people in the palace all kneeled down as well. Faye heard what was happening behind him. He took a peek behind him and had to force himself from laughing. The act must go on. He started his bullshit in English. "D's nuts. I'm the handsome king and you are not. I used to call you on my cell phone. Why you always lying? None of you guys understand me. You don't understand, shit. I got to be serious." After repeating that for a couple times, Faye felt it was enough so he stood up. All the people behind him stood up as well, confused. Suddenly, Faye pulled out Brooke's sword from the scabbard and cut his palm. Blood spurted out. Faye reached his hand out and let the blood drip into both pots filled with clear water. "Alexander, you!" Angela yelled when she saw Faye's action. She was worried. Faye turned around and smiled at Angela to signal her that everything was under his control. While everyone was staring at his bleeding hand and the 2 pots, Faye secretly blocked the vision of everyone behind him with his back and opened the bottle containing the minor healing potion. He dumped half of the bottle of potion into the 2 pots. "O God of War! My brave warriors, you will all be saved. After my prayer, the God was willing to save us all. He has infused his power into my body. Anyone who drinks this blood water filled with the God's power, and all injuries will be recovered." Faye bullshitted even more. He was not ashamed at all. To prove his points, he put his bleeding hand into the water. After 2 seconds, when he pulled his hand out, the wound was recovered, with only a light red scar visible. What? My God. After witnessing the miracle, the crowd went crazy.